talk button. When you finish, please turn the button off.
So welcome back, everyone. We're now going to proceed with the open public comment session. Few opening instructions, which have been provided to each participant already. Please tailor your remarks to the topic of today's briefing, which is hate crimes and bias-motivated incidents. Please state your name for the record. Please note that the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights has a policy not to defame, degrade, or incriminate any person. Also, this comment period is a time for the commissioners to listen, not to engage in questions or discussion with presenters. So we appreciate your testimony. We're very eager to hear it, and we will not take your short time with questions or with dialogue. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, which will be measured by a timer. The box with the 3 lights here reflects that time, and when the light turns from green to yellow, that means that 1 minute remains, and when the light turns red, you should conclude your statement. And if you do not conclude it, I will conclude for you.
Thank you for coming.
If you've not finished or would like to submit additional information, we encourage you to do so by mailing or emailing your written submission to us at the address provided on your information sheet, and that should be provided by June 11th, 2018. While waiting for your turn, please sit in the numbered chair that corresponds with your ticket. Thank you all for coming up to the microphones already. And if you need to step out briefly before it is your time to speak, to use the restroom or otherwise, please let a staff person know. Doesn't seem like a very good idea with the 3 minutes. And if you have any questions, please ask a staff member. At least one of our commissioners has a flight to catch, and so might have to step out a few minutes early, but hopefully we'll all be here. So we'll now begin public comment with our first speaker.
Hello, my name is David Estrin. I'm here with you today because all 4 of my grandparents survived the Holocaust. I'm the grandson of Jew number 67245, and when I was 13, my grandfather brought me to the Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria to show me what that truly meant. That day, he sparked a fire in me which would go on to reveal my responsibility to fulfill the promises of never forget and never again, not just for the Jewish people, but for all people. After he passed away, I founded Together We Remember, a nonprofit that combines technology, art, and activism to transform remembrance into action to end identity-based violence around the world. Each April, Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, we organize interactive vigils that commemorate the victims of genocide and atrocities throughout history and celebrate the stories of heroes who've saved countless lives time and again. This past April, we organized over 40 vigils across 9 countries in high schools, universities, museums, houses of worship, and public spaces. In Charlottesville, Virginia, we brought together city leaders across identity groups to build relationships of trust and solidarity, which will be critical to keep the peace in August, the 1-year mark of the Unite the Right rally. In Brooklyn, New York, we united survivors, activists, and tech innovators to explore immersive technologies like virtual reality and portals by shared studios, which can foster empathy, empower vulnerable communities, and inspire collective action. In Boca Raton, Florida, an interfaith coalition and the ADL organized an evening of art, activism, and dialogue on the meaning of never again and commemorated the victims of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas school shooting. And here in Washington, Congresswoman Ann Wagner led a series of bipartisan floor speeches in honor of Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month. The list goes on, including communities in Zambia, DR Congo, Rwanda, Cambodia, Canada, Germany, France, and the UK. One of the most common pieces of feedback we heard from participants is that they don't have many opportunities to connect face-to-face and work alongside people from across the fault lines in their communities. In countries with a recent history of mass atrocities, networks of non-political peace-building organizations often emerge to mend racial, religious, and political divisions. That sort of network needs to be more fully developed here in America. Our experience has revealed that we already have the technology, know-how, and willpower to end bias-motivated violence, but we need more opportunities to connect, collaborate, and put these puzzle pieces together. Now imagine peaceful, rapid response vigils wherever white supremacists seek to achieve silence or violence. Imagine a global counter-narrative campaign every April in partnership with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to amplify inspiring voices standing up to hate across the globe. We believe that if we can create enough of these opportunities to unite, we will turn the tide of rising extremism in the US and make never again a reality worldwide by 2048, the 100-year anniversary of the UN Genocide Convention. By remembering humanity at its worst, we can inspire humanity to be its best, one community at a time. Thank you.
Second speaker.
I'm Devin Watkins, attorney at law. First of all, I wish to inform the commission that pursuant to 42 USC 1975D, it appears that the statutory authority of this commission has terminated. Returning to the topic of hate crimes, I wish to speak today to oppose the violation of my civil liberties. The Hate Crimes Prevention Act was passed under the purported authority of the 13th Amendment. That amendment prohibits slavery and involuntary servitude. Violence based on a person's race, color, religion, or national origin are not slavery, nor are they involuntary servitude. It demeans those that had to live in slavery to say otherwise. Slavery legally allowed people to beat, rape, and murder other human beings. Slavery was an evil beyond anything we experience today, and thank God we stopped it in this country. Congress has the power to stop slavery using any reasonable means. But this is not even intended to stop slavery. Does anyone really believe this is the purpose of the law? It isn't even claimed to be doing so. The only valid use of the 13th Amendment is for the end of prohibiting slavery and involuntary servitude. Slavery and involuntary servitude are already illegal, and there is no fear of them occurring again. It is wrong to do violence based on a person's race, color, origin, which is why those acts are prohibited in every state. But there is no basis in our Constitution for a federal prohibition. Our civil liberties are based on the respect of the rule of law, especially the supreme law of the land, the Constitution. It violates everyone's civil liberties to threaten people with an unconstitutional law beyond the enumerated powers of the federal government. The reality is these acts are already prohibited under state law. This statute is instead being used to subject politically disfavored minorities to double jeopardy in violation of the Fifth Amendment. This is done by prosecuting them twice for the same act, once at the state level and again at the federal level. Justice, properly understood, requires that all people be given a fair trial in which they are to be released if they are found not guilty. I will leave you with the words of George Washington: "The best and only safe road to honor, glory, and true dignity is justice."
You. And our third speaker.
Hello, my name is Jake Levin, and I am speaking on behalf of the organization Shared Studios. We are a collective of artists, community organizers, and former lawyers who are working to connect diverse communities around the world through live, full-body video environments called portals. When you enter a portal, you come face to face with someone in a similar portal somewhere else around the world and can speak as if standing in the same room. Participants have expressed feeling as though they are breathing the same air as someone who may be thousands of miles away. We are working to create a world where people from a tech hub in Rwanda and a community center in Milwaukee can engage one another in intimate dialogue, collaborate on new ideas, create art, and play. More than 150,000 portal participants have experienced a connection over the last 3 years. Conversations have ranged from the deeply personal to the everyday. Here in Washington, a drone pilot for the US Air Force met an Afghan man for the first time through the portal, only days after flying drones through Afghan airspace. A group of Palestinian women shared a portal conversation with an Israeli entrepreneur and an Iranian artist, discussing their inability to receive proper cancer care in Gaza City. Iraqi students and their teacher met with members of Congress before a scheduled vote on the Education for All Act, which directed funds to education in emergency zones. all of those members of Congress voted yes. For the last 2 years, portals have also connected heavily policed communities across America and Mexico. Residents in a number of cities have come together in portals to strategize about how to improve police-community relations. And on the ground in Milwaukee, our portal curator used his position to bring together rival gangs to create local truces, which led to the creation of a Neighborhood Watch Coalition. While polarization seems to be on the rise, study after study reinforces the idea that hate is reduced through deliberate dialogue between diverse groups. Individuals and groups on opposing sides of conflict rarely find opportunities to connect face-to-face, let alone collaborate. We believe that if we can create enough opportunities for different individuals to share the same physical space, they will quickly realize that their similarities outnumber their differences. We have allowed social media and new technologies to drive us deeper into our own tribes. In these insulated social groups, hatred can thrive. But portals created spaces for dialogue outside our tribes that challenge stereotypes and broaden worldviews. Portals demonstrate how technology, if constructed well, can thrive as a vehicle for peace. Innovations in immersive technology are fundamentally reshaping how we counter hatred and violence, and I hope you'll remember portals as we all seek new solutions to these enduring problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Our fourth speaker.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Kim, and I am the Vice President for Policy and Programs at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, AAJC. Our mission is to advance civil and human rights for Asian Americans and to build and promote a fair and equitable society for all. For over 25 years, we've served as the leading civil rights voice for the Asian American community, the fastest growing population in the U.S., fighting for our civil rights through policy advocacy, education, and litigation. Following the disturbing rise in hateful rhetoric and hate incidents across the country leading up to and following the 2016 election, the Asian Americans Advancing Justice National Affiliation launched StandAgainstHatred.org, a website to track and report hate incidents against Asian Americans. Since a significant number of Asian Americans have limited English proficiency, approximately 1 in 3, we've ensured that this site is accessible in multiple languages, including Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese. We've also partnered with the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights Under Law to provide assistance through their Stop Hate hotline in Cantonese and Mandarin, Korean, and Vietnamese. Since the launch of this site, we have received more than 200 reports from across the country, covering anti-Asian and anti-immigrant incidents that range from hateful slurs, bullying, harassment, and violence. Asian Americans have been the targets of violent hate crimes, and one widely reported incident that was also shared with our site was the shooting in Olathe, Kansas, which killed Srinivas Kuchipotla, and the shooter reportedly yelled, "Get out of my country," as he attacked. It is also important to document and share stories of everyday hate, including racial slurs and street harassment. While these may not meet the definition of a hate crime, such incidents are still harmful, not only to the impacted individual, but also to the community at large. We have received many reports to our site of people being told to go back to your country, or you don't belong here, often with curses and racial slurs. We already know that hate crimes are underreported, and the federal government must do more to incentivize better collection and reporting of this data. We must do more to invest in outreach and education to encourage reporting and at the same time ensure that this is accessible, that our communities are not fearful of those whose job it is to keep them safe, and that translations and in-language assistance are available. And in this political climate, we face even greater challenges with assuring immigrants that they should feel safe reporting hate crimes and hate incidents. Community safety and community trust suffer when local law enforcement officials are also tasked with immigrant enforcement. We'll continue to work to report and raise our community's voices. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next speaker.
Thank you. I'm David Stacy, Government Affairs Director for the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest LGBTQ organization working on civil rights. Matthew Shepard lost his life to violence in the fall of 1998. He was brutally beaten with the butt of a .357 Magnum, tied to a fence, and left to die in freezing temperatures because he was gay. This October will mark 2 decades since Matthew's murder, and the public reckoning that followed culminated in the passage of the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. This law has served as an essential federal tool to combat and prosecute bias-motivated crimes. However, it's far from a cure-all. Since 2016, we have seen a significant increase in violence against LGBTQ people, particularly transgender people, and in communities of color. In 2017, it proved to be the deadliest year for transgender people on record. At least 28 transgender people lost their lives to violence. Allie Steinfeld was a 17-year-old transgender girl living in rural Missouri. Her lifeless body was found partially burned with stab wounds to her genitals and with her eyes gouged out. Mercedes Vallum was also only 17 when she was stabbed multiple times and beaten to death by a hammer while trying to flee. Her attacker admitted to killing her because she was transgender. This extreme violence is often seen with hate crimes. There are also survivors who must live with the emotional and physical scars, like Anthony Gooden and Marquez Tolbert. Anthony, who had recently come out as gay to his family, was sleeping next to Marquez after working a long day. A family friend staying at the house saw them sleeping together, boiled a pot of water, poured the scalding water over the couple while they slept, screaming, "Get out of my house with all that gay." Anthony was placed in a medically induced coma for weeks, over 60% of his body burned. Although we know the reported incidents of hate are on the rise, we also know that the statistics are drastically undercounted. State and local police departments are not federally mandated to record hate crimes, and many lack the training necessary to recognize them and work with survivors and their families. 17% of jurisdictions across the country had not reported a single hate crime to the FBI for the last 6 years. This means that major cities like Mobile, Alabama, Savannah, Chatham metro area in Georgia, and Irving, Texas report they have consistently have 0 hate crimes within their borders. Those numbers are just not credible. Violence against any member of a community sows a culture of fear and otherness that prevents them from living full lives. However, some members bear the disproportionate brunt of this unspeakable violence. The intersection of racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia conspire to drive too many of these women employment, housing, housing, healthcare, and other necessities, making this transgender community more vulnerable to fatal violence. In addition, people living in the intersection of marginal communities feel less safe going to police. No one should have to fear for their safety because of who they are or who they love. Training is essential, and we also believe that mandatory reporting of hate crimes should be required across the country. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. And I want to thank the Commission for allowing me to be here this afternoon to comment on hate crimes and other incidents that are bias related. My name is Juan Thomas, and I'm the president of the National Bar Association. The National Bar Association is the largest association of African-American lawyers, judges, and law students in the country. We represent a network of over 65,000 across this country. And we historically have been opposed to the proliferation of hate crimes and bias-motivated cases. And in many instances, they continue to be ineffective, unfortunately ineffective in responses. Today, I come before you, as many of my colleagues have already spoken, to bring attention to the issue of hate crime nationally, as well as in my home city of Chicago. The NBA believes that the protection of fair housing rights and, the NBA believes in the protection of fair housing and fair housing rights. We defend against complaints of discrimination based upon the 16 protected classes, including race, sex, religion, sexual orientation, discrimination in employment, housing, public accommodations, credit, and bonding. The NBA stands united with our collaborative bar associations, the civil rights community, and the community at large in condemning hate crimes, white supremacy, and bigotry in every form, and we stand in solidarity with people of color who find ourselves targeted by hate speech and hate crimes. Congress and all civic-minded individuals and entities must explore how our government is investigating the rooting out of hate crimes and those violent white supremacist groups that are perpetuating these heinous crimes. As we examine the federal government's role in responding to hate crimes, we should also urge Congress to oppose the introduction and the co-sponsorship of the Protect and Serve Act of 2018, which would extend hate crime protection to law enforcement officers. We believe it is imperative and counterproductive to consider this legislation that would further erode police and community relationships. I respectfully submit this statement, urging the Commission to diligently examine both best practices for preventing, investigating, and prosecuting, including reporting practices by local law enforcement officials and efforts by the U.S. Department of Justice and Education, and institute all mechanisms to bring forth a more timely and accelerated remedy to the victims of hate crimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our public speakers. This will close our public comment period. We appreciate your time. Thank you. And that will bring us to the end of our briefing. Thank all of our panelists, all of our public participants, and today has been tremendously informative. Just to be clear, as I said earlier, the record for the briefing remains open until Monday, June 11th, 2018. Panelists are members of the public who would like to submit materials for commission consideration, which we welcome, may mail them to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, Office of Civil Rights Evaluation, 1331 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, Suite 1150, Washington, D.C. 20425, or email them to hatecrimes@usccr.gov. Nothing further. I hereby adjourn our briefing. Thank you very much.